All right, I'm just doing a voice check to make sure I can hear. And I think all is well. Hi, everyone. It is me, Flower Kisma, and welcome to the weekly Fairy with Teeth reading. And I wanted to just show you where I am. I'm in the Cyrodiilic Jungle House. It's mine. And it's called The Music Box. Hey, Lauren, nice to see you. And this is a fun little build because all I did was create the garden environment. And in ESO, we get to buy music boxes from the marketplace. So my little store here is the music box. And so when you come inside of it, it's filled with music boxes and the merchant who will take your money if you want to buy one. But all kinds of music boxes are scattered around the room. And of course, as always, this is dedicated to Dibella, the goddess of music and art. And I've got all these very cool music boxes. I have one playing right now that I just got yesterday. So I'm going to show it to you because it's kind of fun. It's this one right here. It's called A Duel of the Sea Blades. And you can see there's a pirate ship and I don't know, another pirate. They're dueling, they're fighting, they're out in the open waters. It's very dramatic music box. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn it off though because it's fine to listen to for a short period of time. All right. So this is my little music box. Hey Dawn, nice to see you. Welcome. Okay, so here we are. And let's see, I'll just show you this over here because this is dedicated to music, right? Music and the arts. And so there's my drum. Let me call everybody to order. Ready? It's a War Caller's painted drum. You probably can't hear it. I hear it, but it's pretty low. Anyways, and there's these right here. These are the Magi. And there you go. There's a pantomime. Okay, I am going to come sit over here on a bench. And, oh, yeah, you haven't seen me yet today. I am on fire. I got my red hair, my red uh, dress on, whatever. Okay. All right, so I think what I'll do is I would like to, whoops, sorry. Maybe I'll just stand. I just want to focus on the garden because I think my garden is really quite pretty. All right. So here we are, Fairy with Teeth. And I hope everybody has something to sip on or munch on. And you're ready to kick back and continue our story. So if you remember last week, we read up until the point that they were ready to do ceremony, I guess. I think they were ready to do ceremony. And Kian was getting a container with a lid on it so that he could walk the stranger that appeared among them up to the stranger's camp and to cross the stream because that's part of fairy lore. If you cross the stream with the fairy and you've got a lidded container, you can trap the fairy inside that container. That's true fairy lore from Ireland. Okay, so I am continuing on page 43. The Bard. Kian nodded at the bard, who turned and moved on. In silence, the two men climbed the hill. Underfoot, sprawling trefoil buds were just beginning to show their yellow petals hidden within. Soon the rough pasture would be filled with color. White bottle, the bloody crane's bill, and the deep blues of the purple bugle. As if reading Cian's thoughts, the bard turned to him and pointed to a group of hairy and coarsely toothed leaf stalks. "Imagine collecting the charlock blossom as food," he said. Cian looked at the weed. "Aye, the prasic bud of the famine," he replied, shaking his head sadly. "It would be sorry times indeed to be relying on such to fill the belly." "And your people, where do they hail from?" the bard asked. "Cork," Cian replied. The stranger glanced at Cian, a knowing look in his eyes. "The people of the mountains, no doubt." Cian studied him. "So, how long you been traveling?" he asked. 8 years. And who are your people?" "Ah, now, that's a good question," the bard was quick to reply. He came to a halt before a line of ash trees, the border of the upper pasture, designating the final ascent to the hill's summit. On the far side of the trees, a small marshy stream gurgled along. The barbed fence that ran most of the length of the pasture perimeter broke here, with a two-step crossover made from rough wood. They climbed over the steps and came to the stream. But as the bard moved to step across the water, Cian quickly stepped beside him, and they crossed together. Cian grinned at the bard's obvious surprise and smirked as he faltered in step. "And your people?" Cian pried again. "Almost there," the bard said, avoiding Cian's question before stopping. "Right," Cian mumbled, looking down the hill. Below, the cat's stone sat proudly in the middle of the field. To the south side rose the rowan grove, the pilgrims waiting on the other side of it, obscured by the boughs. It's a sight to behold, isn't it?" asked the bard. And then, "So do you always carry the cold staff?" Cian lifted the hazel staff, his grip instinctively tightening. The staff was 5 feet in length, with the thickest part almost 2 inches in girth. The wood had worn smooth and grown dark with age. The bottom end was rounded, while the top of the staff had a natural fork, each side cut to a point 3 inches long and a half-inch in diameter. He smiled and held it up before him. "Just like McCool, eh?" Cian laughed, noticing the queer look that came over the bard's face. Feeling foolish, Cian lowered the staff and with his chin pointed in Vivian's direction. "She wanted you to know that you're welcome to join our picnic after the ceremony." "Did she now?" the bard mused, eyes intently focused downhill. "That would be like her, wouldn't it? Best of both worlds." "What was that?" Cian asked, cocking an ear toward the bard. "I didn't quite hear you." A strange feeling came over Cian that this man somehow knew Vivian. "I'd be delighted. And will you let me know when it's appropriate for my return?" asked the bard, focusing gray eyes on Cian. Or so Cian had thought, realizing they now seemed a bright blue. "Cian!" The distant sound of Vivian's voice wafted through the air. "She's growing impatient," Cian said, turning back to the bard, who was no longer by his side. The sound of a snapping twig brought Cian around. He spotted the man moving between two furze bushes before he disappeared. "Bullocks," was the only thing Cian could think to say at the man's assuming speed. He involuntarily raised his shoulders towards his ears and shook himself. Not of this world. Definitely not of this world. Kian thought as he pulled out the cigarette tin and opened it. He took out a fag and lit it, then stuffed the tin back in his pocket, not taking his eyes from the spot where the stranger had disappeared. He took a long drag, filling his lungs with smoke, tasting the nicotine in his mouth. Kian studied the hand-rolled cigarette. One of these days he was going to give up the nasty habit. One of these days. He stuck it back in his mouth and made haste down the hillside. The midday sun shined brightly, producing an uncommonly hot Irish day of 80 degrees Fahrenheit. The group was forming a processional line. Steve lay back to continue to sun himself. All he cared about was the food. His decision not to participate had angered Marcella, although the others couldn't figure out why it did. After all, Steve hadn't seemed interested in participating in any of their spiritual activities from day one. Ellen moved next to the disgruntled woman. "Min," she whispered, smiling, "don't let Steve spoil your day." "I know," said Marcella, adjusting the red and purple scarf around her hips, while letting out a heavy sigh. I thought maybe this trip would help him see how important this all is to me." Ellen sympathetically patted Marcella's back, then stepped back into her place in the procession. "She okay?" Ken asked, leaning over Ellen's shoulder. "Just pissed." Ken leered at Steve. "What an idiot," he snarled. "Be quiet before she hears you, and he hears you also," hissed Ellen. "Well, I'll talk with him later," added Ken, a smug look on his handsome face. The patriarch taking charge. "Oh, you do that now?" Ellen threw over her shoulder, amazed at her husband's boldness. She smoothed her chestnut curls back and patted her cheeks, feeling the burn on them, and smiled at Mark. He had such a kind, gentle smile. "Big man," she mouthed to Mark, who laughed. Mark liked Ellen, loved her Irish accent, and thought Ken took her for granted. "Move those cute little buns," Kat said to Mark, who was now holding up the line. "Thanks," he said, glancing over his shoulder at Kat. I guess I was spacing out." "Yeah, right," Kat responded, giving him a knowing wink. "She's cute," she whispered. "I totally understand." Mark's mouth dropped open. "What?" asked Kat playfully. "I can look too." Vivian led the small group in procession to the Catstone. Their brightly colored scarves fluttered in the light breeze. She beat a lively tune on a ballroom drum, while Rose and Shelby took bells, giggling. Marcella cast an angry look at Steve before giving her full attention to the ceremony, and at the rear of the line came Carla, silent and stoic, followed by Joe with camera in hand. The procession moved 3 times round the base of the Catstone and came to a stop before the ground altar. Vivian bent down to relight the white candle that had blown out. Feeling a familiar presence, she stood and turned to find Kian directly behind her, standing on the lip of the mound. Her priest was here. They moved together. "Ready?" she asked him. "I took the bard across the water," he informed her. "He won't be bothering us again unless we want him to." "Good," sighed Vivian with relief, and then she stopped and peered over Kian's shoulder. "The bard's cap?" she asked, scanning the line of ash trees on the ridge above and seeing no sign of a camp. "Show's on," Kian said, bringing Vivian's attention back to his intense brown eyes. Vivian smiled, a soft smile. All right, that's 1 chapter down. So here we go. I got to take a swig. My mouth is really dry today. And while we're at a pause, I will change my position. Okay. Crystal fire. There are ceremonies that are nice and light and airy. There are ceremonies that are heavy and intense. The ceremony Vivian prepared to lead the group through was a combination of the two extremes. The first time Kian had witnessed Vivian working the power of this site he loved so well, he had been impressed with her sincerity, her ability to really affect each person. Vivian was gifted and unselfishly gave herself to the process. Over and over, he watched her midwife, a symbolic death and rebirth with each person, and marveled at the show of raw emotion washing down each face. The love flowed from Vivian as she became the priestess, embracing each person with her arms to gently welcome their newborn spirit to a new life. With a sweep of her arms, she would gently shift their focus on to the undulating landscape. "Meet the goddess of the land, Era," she would whisper, stepping back, setting the person free to take the first step into a new life. Experiencing the ceremony a second time was no less impressive for Kian. He moved to his position next to Vivian near the opening at one end of the capstone and listened to the soft melody of her song. She sat on the ground before the opening of the womb-like tunnel that ran under the several tons of rock which rose 10 feet into the air and was at least 30 feet in girth. The top of Ken's head appeared in the small tunnel. He looked up, raw emotion registering on his face, and collapsed, sobbing, to the ground. Kian squatted next to Vivian. They each grabbed one of Ken's arms and helped pull him free. Kian rose and stepped back. Vivian stayed by Ken as he curled into a fetal position. She caressed his hair and cheek, cooing to him that he was okay, that all was well. "Thank you," Ken finally whispered, nestling closer to Vivian, who instinctively wrapped her arms around him and rocked him as if he were a little boy. Kian watched, thinking she looked like the Madonna, an angel. She was the one he had waited for all these years, and in that moment of realization, time bent. Ancient memories began to surge within of days together which had not been in this life, and Kian knew that he loved Vivian greatly. Faery-Chronicle entry 1.555.2. The mortals were oblivious, all of the pilgrims, to the mystic dance that was unfolding. Mocha sighed, and her breath swirled around the Al-Namuran, swirled around the priestess as she helped the man to his feet and let him go to see the spirit of the land before him. The breath swirled around the priest as he stepped next to his priestess and touched her hand. "Together at last," Mocha spoke from the depths of the hollow hill, her words vibrating up through the earth, moving a ribbon of energy through the couple who, feeling the flutter of butterflies in their stomachs, froze long enough to smile into each other's eyes. From the fire temple on top the hill I watched. Yes, we, the hosts, took witness. "You must take them the crystal fire," Etang Queen called to Lu, the stranger who had stood among the mortals. "I can't," he responded sadly, "for the druid grew wise and crossed water with me." Ashamed, he turned away. As was the law, once a fairy was stayed by water he could not recross until fetched. "This priest is well trained," said King Medea. "Yes, a perfect ally for the priestess," added his queen. "Lucky for you, Lu," she said, turning to the sun god. "He did not have a container in which to capture you." Lu colored, shrugged, refocusing his bright eyes on the woman below. Soon he would be able to give her the gift. "Soon, Banba, soon," Loon whispered to himself. But I heard. I stood back and studied the sorrow on his face, and when I looked back to the mortals below, how I wished she was not one of them. The new-born pilgrims sat on the western lip of the mound with their backs to the capstone. They faced a picturesque view of their new world. Vivian and Cian stood directly behind them, smiling into each other's eyes. "Shall I give them the blessing of the She?" Cian whispered. "Yes. Oh, please do," replied Vivian, and for the first time she was able to give Cian support as he worked the energy. She filled with pride as she watched him bend down to bless each pilgrim, as she witnessed the priest finally emerging and the druid taking a back seat. This was exactly what she needed, had even hoped would one day happen. Vivian stepped behind each person in unison with Cian, as if she were his mirror reflection. And when Cian bent down to commune with one after another, Vivian would respectfully lift her eyes to the rolling landscape beyond. A strange emotion pulsed between Cian and Vivian, imbuing anyone between them with such a force that love was ignited. It cast a sparkling golden tapestry around the small group and grew stronger and brighter with each beat of the heart. Vivian felt elated. She felt higher than she imagined was ever possible. And as she looked at the landscape, she felt an uncanny sense that she had melded with it. In that moment of awareness, she remembered something she'd long ago forgotten. Faery-Chronicle entry 1.55.3. Banba, Banba, Banba. Lu's voice came as a whispering breeze, chanted over and over again. Banba, Banba, Banba. The sound rose up within her, soon spilling out of her mouth, spreading over the hillside. She had awakened. The hosts cheered. Maka nodded, and for just 1 millisecond, it became apparent that Vivian heard our unearthly chorus. Vivian sensed our supernatural presence. Instinctively, she grabbed her heart and whimpered. The pain of such emotion was very great. We always hurt her. Cian heard Vivian whimper and felt a strong emotion, but he could not bring himself to look up from Marcella, whom he was blessing. Tears sprang to his eyes, and a sigh, deep and heavy, yet as light as the heavens, flowed from his lungs. Marcella, caught in the force of love moving between Cian and Vivian, thought, though she did not know what it was, opened her eyes and saw tears glistening in Cian's eyes. Thinking they were for her, Marcella fell in love with Cian, forgetting all about her husband as he lay sunning himself down the hill. Cian stood and focused on Vivian. She was beautiful. Her body shone with light. Her face held an expression of bliss. She longed to put his mouth over her full lips, slightly parted in a sigh of ecstasy. Sensation jolted through him. His manhood reacted, and for just 1 millisecond, Cian thought he saw sparkling light on the hill crest, thought he saw the shapes of bodies outlined in golden light. As Vivian opened her eyes, she was looking into Cian's eyes. Neither of them could move or look away. "Maccool, the husband, see Bonba, your wife," Maka said softly. "The hosts rejoiced." Lou frowned. "I wept with joy and sorrow." The swirling rush of energy subsided. Vivian and Cian found they could not move again. The pilgrims formed a circle around the couple, unaware of what had happened, unaware that the fairy host had supported the natural energy of attraction or had caused it to amplify and become an electrical ribbon. Each person had unconsciously sensed an uncanny force, and each searched the group for someone to love. Even Steve felt the force and sat up, coming out of the numb sleep he had put himself under. The importance of finding the group made him climb to the knoll above the small grove of trees to where the Al-Namuran sat. He viewed the group circle, and Cian, whom he had dubbed the party druid, and Vivian, who he called privately Queen Bitch. As he looked at the Queen Bitch, his heart melted, and that oldie goldie rippled through his mind again. I wish they all could be California girls. Cian focused on Vivian, while Ellen focused on Cian, as did shy Shelby. Mark focused on the lovely, sophisticated Ellen. Kat found her attraction fixed on Ellen too, while Rose fixated on Joe. Donna found the man of her dreams within, a phantom whose golden hair and brown eyes came to life within her mind, the husband she would never have. Over the tops of heads, Carla saw blue Irish eyes smiling at her. She returned Joe's smile, but her gaze went to Cian. Carla was attracted to him, just as Marcella was. The force of fairy love was so great, so overwhelming, that everyone was rendered helpless in its wake. This love, beyond human experience, had found Vivian when she first stood on the hill of Ishnok. That is when she began referring to it as the love of the beloved. It had ruined her, made her human love seem puny and insignificant. The love beloved had sent her sprawling head first into months of depression after returning home. Nothing in her world seemed real after feeling it. Well, that was an intense day. I remember it well. Okay, let me find another position. I hope everybody's doing well out there today. I'm doing well. I'm enjoying a beautiful spring Southern California day. Okay, moving on to the next chapter. I know that I've died here before. Vivian knew exactly when she first felt the love of the beloved. She knew the exact moment its icy warmth seeped into her heart and seized her soul. How could she ever forget that day? July 10th, 1994. She had finished investigating the Catstone, crawling through the tunnel, and spontaneously experiencing the rebirthing that she later fashioned the pilgrimage ceremony after. In her feeling of being newborn, she knotted the bottom of her black skirt at the knees and climbed 3/4 up the huge boulder. When she turned and took in the expansive pasture sprawling before her, inclining up the hill, she gasped. Vivian knew the place. "Hear me!" she called forth, throwing her arms open wide. She listened to a torrent of words uttered from her own mouth, words of proclamation and of prophecy, a deliverance of a prohibition. And in that blurring time, she saw a crowd standing before her, scattered about the pasture. She saw their faces, the color of their eyes and hair, the clothing they wore. She heard the sound of laughter and children off in the distance. She smelled acrid things and sweet smells and pungent spices. The hillside had come alive with activity. Blue and green and red banners waved on the summit. Cheers arose from far off and above her head, and then the gentle strains of harps and tin whistles and pipes. Glancing down at the clothes she wore, she saw briefly, ever so briefly, her legs covered with a heavy dark red wool skirt and the edges of a fine woolen cloak of purple and russet and deep indigo blue, the hem edged in a lozenge design with golden thread. She felt the soft roughness of a wool mantle about her neck and the heaviness of some type of jewelry on her shoulder. Vivian knew as she stood there that she was in two worlds, two times at once. Her puny little mind gasped at the reality of it, and she lost her balance, grabbing for the edge of the stone behind her and crouched down to save herself from falling. She was shaking and felt nauseous. Looking up, she found herself alone again, the knot of her black skirt biting into the crease behind her knees, and the Levi jean jacket covering her arms. All was in order. She was back in 1994. As the realization of what had happened hit home, forcing her to scramble down the rock face and run up the hill, she ran without thinking of where she was going, only that she had to go somewhere else. She stopped underneath a lone hawthorn tree in the middle of the pasture, halfway up the hillside, and sat on a moss-covered rock at the base of the tree trunk. With hands clutching knees, she rocked, fighting the tears as they made tracks down her face. Nothing made sense. Vivian was shattered and elated at the same time. Her heart ached. Oh, how it ached, and such sorrow filled her. Vivian bawled like a little girl and felt angry and rabid, and then the song of a magpie hushed her mourning. She watched the bird as it perched on a hedge. Then another came, and another, and with the third bird a gentle breeze caught her hair and caressed her cheek, drying the wetness there. Stillness embraced her, thick and ominous, and Vivian knew she was back in that other time. Without thinking, she rose to her feet, dropped her arms to her side, and faced the Catstone, seeing only it, the lower ledge that rested hip high from the muddy earth at the boulder's base. She stood then, as she did now, closed her eyes, and sang her sorrowful lament. The song rose from the deepest well of her soul. It rose from somewhere outside of herself. It became everything, and all existence seemed to linger on the vibration of each word. I know that I've lived here before. I know that I've danced here before. I know that I've sung, and I know that I've lain here. I know that I've loved here before. I know that I've lived here before. I know that I've danced here before. I know that I've sing, and I know that I've loved here. I know that I've died here before. The song was no less powerful now as she sang it, not for the pilgrims, but her own soul, and for the hosts she somehow knew were gathered and watching. Mostly she sang it for her beloved, her lost and lovely beloved. This was the sorrow she had to live with, that he was lost to her, and that somehow she had caused their separation, his demise. This knowing which remained nameless and faceless, just a fragment of knowing, was the thorn in Vivian's side, the cause of her own mortal unhappiness. How could she ever explain this to her husband, or even her closest friends, when she herself could not fully explain its existence? It was only a haunting, a fragment of memory that ate at her mind. Tears slipped from beneath her closed eyelids. Each pilgrim heard the depth of emotion in Vivian's voice, felt it stir their insides. As Vivian sang, she wove a spell, altering time. In reliving her memory, she was stepping between the cracks, bending the fabric of time, and opening a door through which the past and future mingled with the present. Faery-Chronicle entry 1.666.1. When Vivian finished singing her song, the world in which the mortals stood seemed suspended in the center of stillness, an infinite pause between each breath. And from the summit above, our hosts had been watching and waiting to see what she would do, could do. "Let us move forward," demanded several fairy. "Not yet," whispered Lou. "She's not ready." "Then bring forth the hag," requested Midir, "and let the ceremony be completed." "Yes," answered his wife, "they are worthy of the earth light. Lou shall fulfill Maka's request when he deems it to be the right time." Lou glared at Idane, for he had no choice in the matter, and disliked the way in which the queen taunted him. "Shh!" came the soft hush of Maka. All eyes turned back to the mortals. A sudden wind blew down from the summit. As it passed over the small group, Carla felt a strange tingling run up her spine. She opened her eyes and looked to Vivian, who stood with eyes closed, tears glistening on her cheeks. Carla loved the song. She too felt the words deeply. They made her long for something she could not quite comprehend. She smoothed her blonde hair away from her face, twisting a strand around a finger. Carla moved to pick up the altar candle and positioned herself on the rock shelf, hip distance from the ground. "Receive now the blessing of the Kalak, for I am her daughter and she speaks through me." Carla brought the candle before her face, opened her eyes, and scried the flame as it flickered in the light breeze. The flame grew still and elongated as if reaching for the heavens. "As death You each pass through my domain upon entering the womb of the great mother goddess to be rebirthed into your new life. Only the crone can give you the power of love, which animates the flesh with spirit. If you wish to become spirit incarnate, come receive the earth light of my love. All eyes turned to Vivian. She raised her eyebrows, shrugging, indicating with her hands that they should move up to the stone, and one by one they stepped forward to offer flowers or a heartstone or chocolate in return for a whispered blessing. One by one each person stepped back and closed her or his eyes, and when everyone came forward, Carla opened her eyes. The first person she saw was Kian standing on the mound above, peering down at her as he leaned on the hazel staff, his unbound hair caught in the breeze and lifted around his head. Kian shuffled under Carla's scrutiny, raising his eyebrows at her. Carla felt a wave of hate toward Kian pass through her. If she couldn't have him, then she was going to do everything in her power to turn Vivian against him. Vivian coughed, snapping Carla's attention to her. "Anything else?" Vivian asked softly. Carla shook her head and slid off the rock ledge. "Nope," she said smugly, proud of the role she had played. The ceremony had clearly come to an end. All thoughts turned to the lovely picnic, bringing a flurry of activity. The mood lightened, and everyone pitched in to help set up the picnic area. Steve and Joe carried the boxes of food up the hill to a lone hawthorn tree standing in the middle of the pasture. Kat and Donna spread out 2 blankets on the ground. Ellen and Shelby sorted the food. Rose and Marcella ran back down to the cat stone to take pictures. The men stood talking and watching the women. And under the hawthorn tree was a happy scene, a busy scene filled with joy and feelings of warmth caused by the May Day sunshine. Before long, several individuals began stripping off outer garments to cool off. Vivian removed her shoes, socks, and black tights, laughing at the comments the men made. Rose went so far as to flash a little thigh. "'Tis Beltane!" Rose yelled, breaking into a little dance. Joe grabbed Rose's hand and twirled her around. "That's the spirit," he said, laughing. Kian and Vivian's eyes met. They burst into laughter. Vivian motioned Kian to her, moving to meet him. "Yes?" he asked, bending close. My toes already have mud between them," Vivian complained good-naturedly, peering down at her feet and wiggling her toes. "Looks inviting," Kian responded. He bent down, his hair brushing Vivian's arms, and squatted. Very gently, he flicked a finger at some mud pushed up between Vivian's toes. This made Steve and Mark laugh. "I want to turn," whined Steve, to which Kian said, "Not a chance, man." Joel howled. "Very funny, you guys," Vivian retorted, pulling her foot away and hiding it under the hem of her long blue skirt. Kian rose and leaned on the hazel staff, trying not to laugh. "Ha ha, Kian," Vivian said, shaking her head. "Very funny." "What?" he said in mock surprise. "Listen," she said, reminding him. "You can go get the bard. Invite him to come feast with us." Vivian's request sobered Kian, but as always, he obliged her without dissent. He gave her a curt nod of his head, and before turning and trotting up the hill, Vivian settled down on a blanket next to Ellen and busied herself by slicing tomatoes for the sandwiches. Overhead, an endless blue sky stretched. The sun was warm and the day was lovely, and by the time Kian returned with the bard, everyone had gathered near the blankets. "Gather round for the feast blessings," said Vivian. "I think we're ready for our picnic." Carla is going to say our blessing. The pilgrims circled the food except the bard, who sat down on the blanket farthest from the group. Carla began the feast blessing, a blessing she'd said at countless feasts, yet halfway through the words seemed to drain from her mind as if the plug to a bathtub had been pulled and all the water spiraled down the drain. Vivian froze as Carla giggled and said, "That's it, I guess," forgetting to offer the feast to the fairy king and queen. In a panic, Vivian attempted to finish the blessing but found no words coming to mind. She too drew a blank. Vivian swallowed and looked to Carla when she heard Carla say, "Everyone eat." Steve and Joe were the first to begin preparing their sandwiches, Marcella and Rose instantly offering to do it for them. "Vivian, will you come with me?" Carla asked, leaning over one of the boxes and rummaging for toilet paper. When Carla was sure they were out of earshot of the others, she grabbed Vivian's arm. "Oh, what a relief to be alone with you," she whispered. "Why?" Vivian asked. "I'm finding myself really sexually attracted to—" Carla paused. She couldn't say Kian, the name she really wanted to say, and so said Joe, matter-of-factly. After all, that was partially true. The two women looked at each other in silence, then burst into laughter. Vivian looped her arm through Carla's, guiding them toward a nearby group of trees and shrubbery. "We're far enough away, don't you think?" she asked, looking back toward the hill. Carla stepped between two trees and a blackthorn hedge. She checked to be sure that she was out of sight of the group before pulling down her underwear and squatting. "Oh, God, this feels so good. I really had to go," she laughed. "You know, Carla, I'm glad you said what you just did because, well, I'm glad it's not just me feeling that way," Vivian confided, "because I am really attracted to—" Vivian paused and turned to look back the way they had come. "Let me guess," said Carla, standing and adjusting her clothing. "To Kian, right?" Carla asked. "He's so gross," she snorted, automatically covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh, Vivian, I didn't mean he's gross, gross," she stammered, feeling bad she had intentionally tried to hurt Vivian. "In fact," she added, "up there, I found that I wanted every one of those guys to turn on to me." A devious grin spread across her face. "Isn't that terrible?" "Yeah," Vivian smiled, avoiding Carla's eyes. The two women fell silent. Carla grabbed Vivian's hands. "I'm sorry I said what I did." Carla hoped she sounded and looked sincere. "I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's because it's Beltane, or maybe because we're on holy ground. Maybe the power of the fairy is really with us. You know, she said, "You're different here, Vivian. It's like you're changing. Even your facial structure looks different. And the emotion in that song you just sang, wow. I think it blew everyone away. I know it totally blew me away. It almost made me cry." Vivian smiled. "You did a good job too, Carla. The Kalak's blessing was really lovely. Where did that come from?" Carla became animated. "I don't know. I was listening to your song and then I felt this rush of energy move up my spine and this fire inside my belly. And I thought I could hear other voices, mumbled voices coming from a distance." Vivian nodded and looked down at their hands, noticing how much older Carla's hands looked than her own. "And I knew exactly what I should do," Carla continued, "as if someone was whispering the idea in my head. And when you sang, your song awakened something." Vivian jerked her head up. Her mouth fell open. "It was inside of me," said Vivian, "and everything is falling into place. And the blessing you gave was or is part of that. Magic is unfolding right now, Carla, and we have to be aware of it. We have to step into it as it happens, or we'll not be a part of it." Vivian looked into Carla's eyes, wanting to ask her friend, "Are you a part of it?" but smiled instead. Come on, she said. You and that baby must be hungry. Okay, let me pause and take a look here. Let me pause. Tell us more of the Hill of Ishnok when you can. Well, thanks, Dawn. Was it the earth light? I'm not quite sure what you mean. Was what the earth light? Um, Anyways, let me take a drink of water here and check time. Page 56. Page 56. Oh, are you reading along? You get to see when I mess up, when I omit words or when I add words. 56. Yeah, that was an earthlight running through Carla. For sure it was. She really became something else. The sound of her voice, everything transformed for that blessing. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, it was a really interesting time. Wow, it's already 10 minutes before 3. Okay, so I was going to read one more chapter, but it's a long one, so I'm going to save it for next week. It's probably the most important chapter that of the event that happened on Ishnok. I can finish off the time kind of talking about Ishnok, but it's a sacred center. It's powerful under the hill. It's on a crest, and inside, it's believed by the locals and all the fairy lore to be a crystal palace, a hollow hill. So they call it a hollow hill because it leads into fairyland, and it goes into a crystal palace in which several of the fairy are connected with. So it's beautiful. I think, of course, it's the sacred center of Ireland, and to many people, it's the heart center of the world. It's called also the navel of the world, and that the catstone, here's local lore, that the catstone is the plug. It plugs, it's like an umbilical cord, right? It's like a belly button. It takes and plugs up the opening that goes into the heart center of the world, and it has to stay there, because if the umbilical cord or the plug is removed, then it allows all of the forces that are connected to the planet to come out, and connected to all forms of energy and entities. And so it's a safeguard against like the bad things of the world that were put down into the underworld, into hell, whatever your religious cultural belief is for that part of the subterranean aspect of life on the planet. So it's kind of interesting. It definitely is a vortex when you're there. I can't believe you weren't there. That we didn't go there. I would have thought we would have gone there, but that pilgrimage was truly a different pilgrimage because we went north. We went up to the west coast and north. But yeah, it is a place that really made me remember so many things. Oh, you would have remembered if we went to Ishnok. You would have remembered because I do a ceremony where you're guided to crawl through a very tight tunnel underneath a 30-ton rock. So not many people can forget that. But it's a second birth, it's a second birth. Yeah, that's a bummer, but it's okay. It's okay. But yeah. So that's all I'm reading for today. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. And I will see you next week, same time, same station. Thank you all for being here. You're wonderful. And even though there's only a few people listening live, there are people re-listening to the replay here on Twitch as well as on the YouTube page. And this is a shout out to those of you who are listening, even if it's not while I'm here live. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right. My voices. I kind of laugh because I get mixed up in them, and then I forget. Am I the fairy or chronicler right now? And I fall back into American, normal. But okay, thank you for that. All right, my dears. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Big kisses all the way around, and I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.